Welcome to our third chapter, The Blues. I love how it opens with a quote by Ray Charles that is attributed to B.B. King. Ray Charles says, "Everybody can understand the blues, regardless of whether they've had them, or that were born with them, or born without. It doesn't matter." Want to first take your attention to the required listening for this chapter. Right here are all those things, and there's listening guides with all of these. So just to let you know that there's going to be at least 20 minutes of required listening. There's also a lot of recommended listening here, and when I initially wrote this, I don't know, I'm going to just take a guess here that it's about 10 or 12 minutes of listening. That might help you see how blues pops up in different styles later, in the bop style or the cool and the funky style. And then these are some early things that are attributed to people in this in our text that are mentioned in our chapter here on the blues. Okay, so right off the bat, we're going to emphasize the listening. um, the blues uses a particular harmonic construction and a particular setup of text, okay, a form of text. So the blues by itself, it's not a particular era. There's not a blues era. It's not a particular style of playing or singing. Um, Blues were composed in every era throughout the development of jazz, including modern times. Blues show a great variety. They can be slow and sad. They can be dirge-like. They can be happy and rollicking. Um, it's important to kind of understand that blues has existed over the entire construction of jazz. As long as jazz has existed, blues has existed alongside them. Okay, it is a part of jazz. So do some recommended listening here. To confirm that would be the Charlie Parker tune, Another Hairdo, and the Milt Jackson tune, Bag's Groove. Those are two modern styles, or more modern styles. Okay, so it's important to see that in the early blues, it didn't have a specific form or specific chord. But as it got into the American mainstream, during the time of Reconstruction, after the Civil War, it began to take on a specific form. And that form and the manner in which it's played and sung, and the harmonies used are what creates jazz, or that blues tune. Those are what defines it. There's a lot of material that says they're the blues that aren't in that blues style. Bye Bye Blues, Limehouse Blues, Wabash Blues. In fact, St. Louis Blues that we'll listen to only has two of the three phrases constructed in the blues pattern. So what defines the blues is the text. There'll be a line that's 8 measures long, and then the same exact words will be repeated that's 8 measures long, and then there'll be an answer or response line that's 8 measures long. That's the 12-bar blues. So 3 8-measure segments, text, text repeated, new text. That's the AAB form. And the chord structure is the same in blues all the time. Starts on the 1 chord, goes to the 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, to the 5/7 chord, back to the 1 chord. So that harmonic structure also defines blues. Another thing that defines blues are the blue notes. And in a scale, an 8-note scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, flatting the 3rd and the 7th is characteristic of the blues, okay? And it's not just flatting them, but it's sort of putting them in between the cracks on the notes on the piano. So if you were doing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you flatted that E flat, that's close to a blue note, and you flatted the B flat, made the B flat, that would also be blue notes. And by the 1920s, they were also flatting the 5th. And this became the blues scale, okay? Another thing that they would do is they would bend and twist these notes. So going back to field and prison hollers, where cries were used to call across fields or great distances, say in a prison or across a field, there would be these cries that were common, and they'd be full of expression and feeling. They'd be long, loud, sort of a musical shout that rises, falls, Oftentimes the male's voice would break into that falsetto, that really high-pitched space that guys have that they use sometimes. And this also sort of compares to the cries of street vendors. So it recommends you listen here to Old Hannah, and also Didn't He Ramble, to get an idea of what we're talking about here. Previously, instrumentalists hadn't used bending notes, those blue notes. They just showed up in the vocals. But later, instrumentalists, horn players, started to include that in their playing too. Okay? And pretty soon, the vocalists were influencing the instrumentalist and borrowing from the instrumentalist, and vice versa. Okay? So we saw that in both strings and horn players, that they would be playing with those blue notes and fall offs and bends and all kinds of things that they learned from vocalists. Okay, there was sort of an out of tune characteristic of the blues. So blues are often written about unhappy situations, such as being out of work, being hungry, broke, lonely, brokenhearted, far, far from home. They often have a melancholy mood, songs of abandonment, despair, sadness. Today, they can be ironic, sarcastic, even vengeful, but they can also be upbeat, happy songs. Blues, that term, the blues, was first coined in 1807 by Washington Irving, whom we know as a writer. Okay. And another characteristic that's really important is that I was talking about those 8 measures. At the end of every 8 measures, there'd be an instrumental fill-in that kind of ties you over to the next set of text, and then a fill-in that ties you over to the next set of text. So there's that fill-in that's characteristic of the blues too. And let's see here. I want to talk a little bit about W.C. Handy. He was the fathers of the blues. He wrote Memphis Blues and St. Louis Blues. We're going to hear that one in a minute. He proved that he could make money by publishing these blues songs. So by 1917, blues had become more popular than ragtime, and ragtime was sort of fading away. There was a lady blues singer named Mamie Smith who sold 1 million copies in 1920 of a song called Crazy Blues. So blues didn't come from common work songs. Work songs were functional. Blues were not functional in a sense of working. They were just emotional. I mean, the way they functioned was just pure expression. They've always been important in every era, and they adapt. So, for example, in the rock and roll era, you had rhythm and blues alongside it. So the blues continues throughout time. From the 1930s, it divides between singers and instrumentalists, though some were both. So, for example, Louis Armstrong and Ray Charles and Jack Teagarden, they were all those singers, but they were also great instrumentalists as well. And I already alluded to the fact that instrumentalists mimicked the singers and then vice versa. Blues are written in iambic pentameter. Okay, and in its shortest form, what we're talking about with that is this: da-dun, 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 da-dun. So it has 5 foots, and the stress is always on the second syllable in each foot. An example of that would be, say, I hate to see the evening sun go down. And that's typical of a blues line. Ba 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 ba. Okay. Let's see here. One of the good ways to hear those instrumental feels would be listening to Fine and Mellow, Empty Bed Blues, St. Louis Blues, Lost Your Head Blues. Okay. Wanted to point out that, again, W.C. Handy was the father of the blues, and here's a picture of him. A little bit about Huddie Ledbetter. So he is a good example of country blues. Country blues is where you have a singer playing a guitar, and that's all there is, just one singer and one guitarist. And that's contrast with the city blues, which had bands. Okay, so interesting story, when Leadbelly was imprisoned, he recorded a bunch of songs for the Library of Congress. So we have a whole body of work, 144 songs that he recorded between 1933 and 1940 when he was imprisoned. One of his very popular songs, or most popular songs, is Goodnight Irene. He plays real aggressively, as blues for him were meant to accompany dance breaks or works, okay? By the 1930s, blues of the South had migrated to Chicago, and that's when blues became city blues and had more players in them. So listen to Hellhound on My Trail by Robert Johnson to get an example of that. Who are the blues singers? Okay, I just talked about this, but I didn't have the slide up, so I'll give you a second on that. Who are the famous blues singers? Well, first of all, they're too numerous to mention, so we're just going to look at the most influential ones. The 20s and 30s produced some of the greatest blues singers and traveling blues musicians. And the traveling blues musicians usually only played the blues. Blues singers were usually both jazzmen and blues players, okay? After World War I, there was a great migration which carried blacks north, and this created a demand for blues in northern cities. And Chicago especially became a blues town. So dividing the blues from 1900 to 1930, you had people like Big Bill Brunsey, Robert Johnson, Josh White, Blind Lemon Jefferson, Leadbelly, Sonny House, Lightning Hopkins, and they would often use guitar and harmonica. This would be like the country and rural blues. The city or urban blues of this time were mostly women: Ma Rainey, Chippy Hill, Mamie Smith, Trixie Smith, Bessie Smith. And they would have a smooth, dramatic emphasis on enunciated words, and they would be followed by a band. You know, they might have piano, a small little jazz combo. Okay, and then later, from 1930 to the present, we saw big blues movements in Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee. People like B.B. King, Robert Cray, T-Bone Walker, Miles Davis, John Scofield, Mike Stern, Michael Brecker, Stephen Ray Vaughan, Keb' Eric Clapton, Robert Kraft. Okay, so two styles of blues: country and city, or country and urban, and two eras: 1900s to 1930s, 1930s till present. Okay. I just mentioned all these names, and these are the ladies that were always fronting a band or accompanied by a band, and talked about their enunciated words. I'm going to emphasize just a couple of people here before I sign off. One is Bessie Smith, born in 1894 in Tennessee. In 1923, she made her first recording, Downhearted Blues, which sold 800,000 copies. She was the best-known blues singers of the 1920s, a large voice, great interpreter of lyrics, deep emotion in her singing. She was a vocal stylist, sang a varied repertoire, and she was known as the Empress of Blues. Ultimately, she recorded 160 songs, which bailed Columbia Records out from bankruptcy during the Depression. She only worked with the best: Clarence Williams, Fletcher Henderson, Louis Armstrong, Coleman Hawkins, James Johnson, Benny Goodman, Charlie Green, Buster Bailey. She came to fame in the 1930s, and unfortunately, she died penniless in 1937 in an automobile crash, but she set the industry standard. At the end of the slides, I've added a short biography that you'll find interesting that's not in the text. Also going to talk a little bit about that she was a student of Ma Rainey, who was a traveling minstrel singer, who was known as the Mother of Blues. She also has some good recordings available that you can find. And I want to mention, before I sign off here, Ethel Waters, who was a recording artist in the 1920s, a nightclub singer of blues, jazz, pop, and swing. She fronted the Benny Goodman Band and the Dorsey Brothers Band. She appeared on Broadway, in film, and on TV. She was born to a single mom, married at 14, and she was a cleaning lady who worked her way into Harlem nightclubs and vaudeville to fame. She influenced most everybody that came after her. Mildred Bailey, Connie Boswell, Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, Sarah Vaughan. She died in 1977. Listen to her stormy weather, and particularly how she emphasizes the N, M, and L consonants. Listen to how she sings smoothly with unique tone and vibrato. Enjoy this chapter on the blues. It's great and a good foundation. Bye now.